Hey Violet, it's your dad here, and I got another story for you from your Bible stories. And today, you remember last time we talked about, well, yesterday really, we talked about the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babel, whichever way you want to say it. Well, there's a last page I forgot to read, so I'll read that now. Yeah, so you remember how God confused the people's languages? So they were talking, saying different things, they couldn't understand each other? Well, the half-built tower stood alone on the empty land. It became known as the Tower of Babel. Babylon was the place where God mixed up the language of the peoples of the earth. Here's a footnote. Tower of Babel. The word Babel or Babel comes from the Hebrew word for confused, balal. In English, babble means to talk too much or to make meaningless sound. You know how babies babble and they go, "Brr, brr, 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 brr." Yeah, well, that's probably not how they sound. But you know how babies go like goo goo gaga and just make all these nonsense words? That's what babbling is. Anyway, um, so tonight, we're going to read about Abraham from Genesis 12 to 17. And that's Abraham. He's a very important, very significant figure in the Bible, and not only in the Bible, but in to other people as well. We'll get into that in a second. Abraham made his home in the land called Haran. He was a simple man. He lived in a tent and tended sheep and cattle. You know what sheep are, right? And they go bah, and they have wool, and they make you use the wool to make clothes and stuff. And then cattle, of course, cattle. That's just cows, and they go moo. And there's a you probably seen quite a bit. Well, I don't know if you've seen my video I posted in shorts. It's your daddy used to work on a ranch back in Oklahoma, and it wasn't any sheep, but there was cows, and there was horses and all kinds of stuff. So Abraham, he was kind of like a cowboy a little bit in a way. So he lived out of tents and he herded sheep and cattle. And so when you herd them, that's because they eat a lot of grass and things like that. And so they'd move them from one grassland to another so that they could keep on eating. Anyway, Abraham believed in God and God blessed Abraham. God came to Abraham and said, "Leave your country and go to the land I will show you. I will make your name great. All peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." The footnotes. Tent. Abraham lived in a tent instead of a house. Many people lived like this so that they could move their herds of animals from one grazing land to the next. That's what I was talking about. Well, that's like back in the day, long time. Well, not as long ago as this, but a couple hundred years ago, and and there used to be cattle runs where people would take their cattle drives, where cowboys would take their boss's cattle to the markets, like up in Chicago and all that, and sell them to the meat packing facilities there, all the way from like Texas and states like that. You know where Texas is, right? It's right near Oklahoma. They would drive all these cattle across the plains and across the basically up the whole country um, to just to sell them off, and so they would travel with these herds, and of course they would sleep out of doors, and you know, uh, they probably pitched a lot of tents. they, or sometimes, you could sleep out in the open air and just under the stars. Um, yeah, that's the herding life. Anyway, Abraham. Abraham means father of many nations. Jewish and Muslim people believe they are descendants of Abraham. Now, that's a little, I mean, that's technically true. There's a little caveat to that. Not all Muslim people, so the Arab people descended from Abraham. Not all Arabs are Muslim, and not all Muslims are Arab. So, like, for instance, your uncle, he's Muslim. That's a different religion. It's they believe different things, but it's similar in that they claim Abraham, and of course in the Bible it talks about how Abraham was a father to those peoples. But so the Arabs, they traveled over the course of history. They traveled into like North Africa and even into uh, towards West Africa, and they spread their religion, uh, and that's why your uncle is Muslim, even though he's African. Uh, and Jewish people too, of course. Jewish people come directly from Abraham as well. And again, not all Jewish people are. So Jewish is an ethno religious group. That means it's a religion and it's a group of people. It, it's kind of complicated. You'll understand it better when you're older. Anyway, let's move on. There's Abraham, and they had donkeys. They used donkeys a lot back then to as beasts of burden to carry things and to carry them as well. Donkeys are very smart animals. Uh, they're not as big as horses usually, but they're usually, I believe, they're smarter than horses. The only problem is they're also more stubborn sometimes. Anyway, so Abraham left his homeland. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all of the people in their household. They went from place to place with all their animals and belongings. But that's them. Sarah. The name Sarah means princess. Place to place. Abraham covered a lot of miles, traveling from his homeland of Haran to Bethel in Canaan, a journey of about 500 miles. Then he went down south to Egypt and back up north to Bethel again. That dude was traveled. Well traveled. Finally, they came to a rich land, but it was not big enough for all the people and animals. So Abraham said to Lot, "Let's part company. If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left." Lot chose to go east to the rich lands near a big city. Abraham went west to the land of Canaan. Here God said to him, "Lift up your eyes and look north and south and east and west. All this land I will one day give to your people. Your children and all who come after will number as many as the stars in the sky." Look, look at all those stars. Do you know how many stars there are in the sky? Can you count them? There's a lot, especially if you go out, especially way out in the country where there's not a lot of ambient light. If you go out and look up at the sky, you can see so many stars, and even the Milky Way galaxy, which is what the galaxy we're part of. But there's too many to count, way too many to count, and that's why God used this illustration. It's like a an illustration is kind of like a comparison to make something easier to understand. So instead of telling Abraham how many children he would have, which Abraham probably wouldn't be able to understand that big a number anyway, God said, I will make your descendants like the stars of the heavens. So all Abraham had to do was look up and see, wow, that's a lot of stars. That means he would have a lot of descendants, a lot of children, and their children had children, and so on. Canaan. The land of Canaan covered present day Israel, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, plus additional coastlands and parts of Lebanon and Syria. Look at how big that tent is. There's people in that part of the world, they still use tents, but they're not like the tents we use when we go camping, in America. They're completely different. They're very big and they're really cool looking. I'll probably find a video or something for you. Anyway, so Abraham moved his tent and went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron. Hebron was a Canaanite city high up in the hills of Judea, in the Negev, a large dry region, about 20 miles southwest of Jerusalem. So that's our introduction to Abraham. And next, we're going to read about three visitors. But yeah, the end. For now, to be continued. Anyway, I hope you have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you have a good night and sleep tight. And tell your mother how much you love her, and tell her how much I love her too. Um, and you know, um, I just want to remind you, Violet, just how special you are to me personally, and to God. Um, but your dad really loves you. I really, really, really love you, and I miss you. And you're the apple of my eye. And don't ever forget, you're smart, you're kind, and you're important. Remember that. Anyway, have a good night. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Bye bye.